of the housekeeping rules. If you are on the phone, mute yourself while Beth is presenting, and then at the end when there are question and answer sessions, you can unmute yourself to do that so we don't hear any extra noises. And so with that, Beth, I'll give you the floor. Please go ahead and start.
Okay, sounds good. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Q4 2015 CCHI Rater Refresh training. This is one of 4 Rater Refresh training sessions being provided for the October-November 2015 testing and rating window. My name is Beth Tobin, and we are the technical partner of CCHI on the administration and scoring processes associated with the core CHI and CHI examination. Tonight's session will last about 30 minutes. Our training will start with a brief overview of the CCHI assessment. This will be then followed by a Rater Refresh, which will take about 20 minutes. And at the conclusion, there will be time to ask questions of either McCann or CCHI. All interpretation and site translation problems are scored. We use anchored rater scales with specific quality of response associated with each score point that the rater assigned. Criterion ratings are randomly inserted during the rating process. This is done to provide a standard measure of quality control of the rating process. All problems are scored by 2 raters. If the raters differ by more than a point, the problem goes to a 3rd rater or a chief who makes the final score determination for the problem. Now we're going to discuss the validity of the items in test. A job analysis was conducted, led by CCHI, which identified the critical knowledge, skills, and activities required for successful medical interpreters. This resulted in the development of a test blueprint which details which skills are critical for successful performance, how these skills should be measured, and with how many test items. Each test item is explicitly linked to a KSA, a knowledge, skill, or activity, described in the job analysis report. The test content developers completed the initial linkage, and CCHI led SMEs verify the content developers linked to. Item performance is continuously monitored by CCHI with assistance from McCann. It is critical to successful and accurate rating and scoring that item raters keep in mind at all times during the rating process what the target audience is for the CCHI assessment. To that end, keep in mind that the purpose of the examination is to distinguish minimum proficiency as a healthcare interpreter from lower level, given the target audience, and not to identify matchable interpreters. The target audience is a person who is able to perform the functions of an entry-level healthcare interpreter competently and independently in a healthcare setting with the knowledge, skill, and ability required to relay messages accurately from a source language to a target language in a culturally competent manner and in accordance with established ethical standards. Keep in mind, too, that entry level means the level required to be able to begin to perform unsupervised healthcare interpreting competently. The CCHI assessment uses anchored rating scales. A hallmark of anchored scales is that each score point has associated with it a specific definition. The task for raters is to then evaluate the item that they are rating in the context of anchored rating scales and assign a rating based upon their common interpretation of the definition provided on the scale itself for each level of performance. Anchored rating scales have clear advantages. They are easy and intuitive to use. They provide very specific feedback to candidates, and they minimize rater subjectivity. The sort of scoring being conducted for the CCHI examination is referred to as performance scoring, which allows the testing of candidates on complex content required a detailed response. In the case of CCHI, The items require examinees to generate a response, which is then scored by raters. There are known issues with performance scoring. Such content is difficult to score. The scoring process inherently has a greater risk of subjectivity, and hence the need for these periodic rater refresh trainings. It is far more costly, due primarily to the cost of scoring and raters, and requires human raters who require both ongoing training as well as monitoring. There are known risks to high-quality rating, and CCHI takes great efforts to mitigate the risk. Good rating requires sound inter-rater reliability. That is, raters must agree with their ratings of the same test taker's response to an item. To the extent the raters agree, we have good inter-rater reliability. The use of anchored rating scales and the rater refresh meetings each rating cycle are meant to maintain this good rater agreement. In addition, McCann regularly tracks and reports on rater performance each cycle, making sure that raters perform consistently. There are known threats to quality rating, and raters should keep these potential issues in mind as they conduct their scoring. First, the halo effect. This is a situation in which positive or negative performance on one part of the test influences subsequent rating. For example, a test taker does well on one problem and is subsequently rated and viewed positively on other problems. Central tendency is the failure to differentiate across candidates, essentially assigning near equal ratings to all problems, regardless of actual test taker performance. Contrast is a situation where a test taker's performance is judged not against the anchored scale, but rather against the performance of other candidates recently tested. And finally, drift. This is a situation that can arise over time when a rater essentially applies different standards or interpretations of the anchored scale over time. So some things to consider as you rate. Are you rating within the guidelines and scoring definitions? Or do the candidate's errors represent the shift in meaning? And now we can review the scoring rubric. For each of the 4 domains, register, lexical content, grammar, quality of speech are all associated with 4 score points. Register is a variety of language used for a particular purpose or in a particular social setting. For example, prescribed grammar, formal, informal tone, form of address, technical terminology, and colloquial language. Second, we have lexical content. Lexical content refers to units of information. These can be individual words, groups of words, or phrases that communicate a single concept. Here, the errors include omissions, additions, and the inaccurate transition of a unit of information. Third, we have grammar. Grammar includes a set of rules that govern how sentences, phrases, and words are put together in a given language. Examples of error in grammar include verb tense, number, gender, and word order or syntax. And finally, we have quality of speech. Quality of speech focuses on the physical characteristics of speech produced. This includes false starts, repetitions, poor pronunciation, volume control, pace, and intonation. Now we consider some general notes on scoring and applying scores to items. During your scoring, keep in mind the following. Each score point has a specific meaning, and all rating is to be done with that meaning in mind. A score of 0 indicates that there are changes or errors which render the results inaccurate. A score of 1 indicates that there are changes or errors which shift the meaning. A score of 2 indicates there are changes or errors which do not shift the meaning. And a score of 3 indicates that there are no changes or errors. Scoring is not a matter of counting errors, but rather of assessing the impact of errors if they occur on meetings. During your rating, if a candidate self-corrects, score their last utterance, regardless of whether it is right or wrong. Such events should be considered as a false start when rating for quality of speech. If you find it helpful to do so, score lexical content first. And finally, keep in mind that omissions are considered lexical content errors. If the test taker fails to maintain the register of the speaker provider or the patient, it is an error and should be scored so accordingly. Any regionalism used in the response is accepted as correct if this response is free from meaning and grammar errors. Now, there may be situations where data is missing. Raters need to distinguish between sources of error as the rating task will shift accordingly. If data are missing due to technical reasons, do not penalize the candidate. If the responses for the rest of the problem are sufficient, score. This does not concern key issues related to scales, medical terms, terms of art, or colloquialism. Mark utterances that are absent for technical reasons as inaudible when appropriate. If you cannot score, mark the problem as cannot be rated. On the other hand, if data are missing due to candidate reasons, candidates may be penalized. If 50% or more is missing and the response cannot be rated, mark the box cannot be rated and write a comment in the notes box. And this documentation is important and must be noted. If data are missing due to candidate reasons, candidates may be penalized. For example, candidate's pace is too slow, or there are too many self-correction false starts that result in the candidate not completing the message and running out of time. If 50% or more is missing and the response cannot be rated, mark the box cannot be rated. Write a comment in the notes box to specify why. For example, too many self-corrections or ran out of time. Now for some overall reminders on the rating process. Each rater is expected to work individually. We have discussed the rating system and the need for raters to agree. In terms of where we see the greatest variability in terms of rating, we need to be clear that overall, raters demonstrate strong, consistent agreement across all rating activities. If there is one area where there is slightly more variability, it would be in the domain of lexical content and grammar for Arabic. Register and quality of speech are similarly consistently rated, as well as grammar in Spanish and Mandarin. McCann and CCHI jointly review rater performance at the end of each testing window. We consider 3 pieces of information in this process. 1, how well do the raters agree with each other or their peers? 2, how often did individual raters require a judge compared to the group overall? And 3, how variable were a rater's rating? Now, if you have not heard from CCHI, it means that your rating has fallen within the range of standards set for rater performance. So congratulations. Your comments on candidates' responses are very important. If you assign a score of 0 or 1, you must provide a comment. Chiefs must provide comments for all responses. And be specific. Give examples of the following instances. Comment if a candidate has really poor skills at keeping the meeting and finding equivalents. Comment if a candidate has poor command of grammar. And finally, comment if a candidate mostly does not maintain register, replaces colloquial expressions with neutral ones, or vice versa. Objectivity in scoring is critical because each of the languages CCHI certifies in is spoken in multiple locations, often resulting in many variants of the same language. CCHI has recruited raters from a broad spectrum of countries. Objectivity is also ensured by having multiple raters rate each candidate, as many as 14, The use of multiple well-trained raters ensures that a candidate's rating is free from many well-known rater effects as well as other threats to objectivity. As a final measure, in cases where raters fail to agree, a judge is used to determine a candidate's rating. Collectively, these measures ensure that the ratings for the CCHI exams are free from bias and as representative as possible of the candidate's true level of performance. CCHI wants each candidate to be rated by multiple raters, and so please follow the following steps. Allocate your time evenly across the rating window. Don't do all of your rating right at the beginning or at the end. Don't rate more than 2 to 3 responses for any one candidate. If a candidate seems familiar, it's likely that they are. So return that item to the pool and move on to the next one. Note that for Arabic raters, you should rate no more than 4 to 5 items per candidate. Follow McCann's instructions regarding the initial workload at the beginning of the testing cycle, which we will detail momentarily. Everyone will start rating on November 9th and end on November 23rd. The workloads per language: Spanish, 200 vignettes, and then wait until I email you. Arabic, 50 vignettes, and then wait until I email you. And finally, Mandarin, 25 vignettes, and then wait until I email you. In the McCann scoring tool, please note that the following will make it possible for you to identify a candidate. This is to help ensure that you don't rate more items for one individual than is permissible. The user ID, session ID, equates to the candidate. The response equates to the candidate's interpretation of a specific vignette. Try not to rate more than 4 vignettes that have the same user ID number value. Now, for a description of the ABA policies in place for CHI testing, I will turn this back over to Natalia.
Thank you, Beth. Well, as you know, we sometimes accommodate candidates who are blind, and for that kind of disability, CCHI's policy is to provide a human reader, which affects how the sight translation portion of the exam is administered. So what happens is that you may hear the English voice during this sight translation recording. That is the human reader reading the text, and then the candidate will be doing the interpretation in a sort of prepared simultaneous mode. In other words, speaking at the same time as you hear that English voice. In this case, the candidate will run out of time, and if you have enough material to score, which most of the time you do, you just score it as a regular response, ignoring the English. However, if you don't have enough material to score, then you will note that there is no that simply there is not enough material to score. Also, if the candidate is cut off, do note so. As far as I know, so far we haven't had any ADA requests, but we may still get some towards the end of the testing window. Thank you.
Okay. If during your rating time you have any questions, please keep in mind the following. CCHI owns all policies. All such questions are addressed directly to them at the contact that I will provide at a later slide. McCann is to be contacted only for customer support, scoring problems, or questions specific to the scoring process itself. The contacts for McCann are included later in this deck as well. If you have technical issues during the rating process, there are different contacts depending on the time of the day. During normal customer support hours, email McCann at the address provided on the slide, but do not, and I repeat, do not email the entire group. After normal customer support hours, email McCann at the addresses provided on the slide, And once again, please do not email the entire group. So to reiterate, when can raters start rating? Rating will start on November 9th. Rating will not run parallel to the testing window, so you must wait until November 9th to start rating. Our testing window began on October 19th and will run until November 7th. The rating deadline will be November 23rd, and the cheat rating deadline will be December 2nd. So this concludes the presentation portion of our session. We'll now open up the floor to any questions for CCHI or McCann.
Well, this is Natalia again. While you're gathering your thoughts, I just wanted to give you the heads up that this is going to be another good session similar to last one in summer. We will have over 200 candidates, which is great. We as usual, anticipate majority of them to be Spanish, but we will probably have the same amount of Arabic and Mandarin as before. That's why that workload is adjusted to closer to what the reality was in the summer. So make sure that after you do your scoring, especially that applies for Mandarin raters, because you have fewer candidates and there are more of you before you continue rating. And you saw the deadlines, they are meant to be before Thanksgiving. We all want to have the Turkey Day without the strain of having to score and rate the responses. So I hope you're able to meet that deadline.
Just to make sure, the Arabic 50, right?
Yeah. Beth, can you go back to that slide?
Yeah, it's 50. I think that was 50.
Yes, we don't know how many candidates we will have, but for right now, we'll do the 50 and then we'll adjust.
Okay. I did write it down. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. It's 50.
I remember Mandarin 25, but I forgot what is Arabic, so 50, yes.
Hi, Natalia and Beth. This is Sandra Dejoux.
Sandra, you had a question?
Yes, it's mainly about a slide. It says the rater does well on one of the sections, and then that influences your rating on others. And I'm paraphrasing. Shouldn't it be the candidate? Can you try to find the slide, please? I'm not sure I read it correctly.
Which slide was that? I'm sorry.
It says rater does well, and that influences your rating. But I think it should be the candidate does well on one subject or on one session.
I think she's talking about the halo effect.
Yes.
Okay. Give me 1 second to get back there.
Okay.
And while we're waiting for that, I just wanted to do the roll call to make sure. Oh, we found it. Okay.
Yes, on the example, it says rater does well in one domain. And
yes, it should be the candidate does well on one domain, and that influences your rating on the candidates. Thank you. That was.
Yes.
That means that you were awake compared to the rest of us.
Yes, I
was.
Well, let me do the roll call. So we have Abdallah, Guadalupe, Sandra, Ray, Sulyen. Did I miss somebody?
Jim Lehman's present. I'm with McCann.
Yeah, I know, Jim. I'm not paying your salary. So.
Okay. Understood.
I just want to make sure that all the employees are in place, but thank you, Jim.
Right, okay.
And when you said Sandra, you meant Sandra Dejoux, not Sandra Tapia.
I meant you, Sandra. Sandra Dejoux, okay. Thank you. Yeah, because I don't see Sandra Tapia here. Okay, it's just interesting that our record shows some HTML5 viewer user, and I'm trying to figure out if that's one of these GoToMeeting things or if it's a real person. Okay, because I see Jim, Beth, and myself also. Okay, well, any other questions? Great. Well, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone. As you know, you have a little break before you start rating, and we will send you the reminder on the 9th that you should go ahead and start. And as usual, I wish you all the good rating window. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Well, Beth, I'll see you in half an hour.